All right, we are back here on the podcast talking Jets football here. Another year that has not gone according to plan, but here to discuss what we've learned so far and what we can look forward to down the stretch of another playoff-less Jet year. The host of the Locked On Jets podcast, great friend of this podcast, John Butchko, is back with us. John, welcome. How are you?
Mike, it's great to be with you as always.
Yeah, great to be with you here. And we talked in the preseason, we did not expect playoffs. I don't think we expected this either. Like, from what you've seen watching the games, being in depth on the Jets more than I am, like, what do you feel like has gone wrong for the most part this year?
I think there are a couple of things. First is that the Justin Fields experiment simply did not work out. The Jets brought Fields in. They were hoping he'd be the next reclamation project. I think they were kind of hoping Fields would have the season Daniel Jones is having in Indianapolis. And it's been a complete failure. I mean, he played really well week one against the Steelers. He had a great game against the Bengals. He was okay on a Monday night early in the season against the Miami Dolphins. But other than that, he's just been really bad. The Jets were hoping he would grow, and he hasn't just not grown. He's regressed. This is the worst season he's had since his rookie year. He's worse than he was in Chicago. And there's a lot of blame that can go around. I don't understand why the Jets got Field if they were going to run this type of offense. I thought we were going to see the Jets run a non-conventional offense, heavy on quarterback runs, option plays, run-pass options, and then a few deep shots. And this has been more of a conventional NFL offense, and that's just not something that's in Justin Fields' wheelhouse right now. But that said, Justin Fields is in year 5. This is his fourth coaching staff. This is his third team. And I think the biggest problem is Justin Fields just has not been able to deliver. But, you look across the rest of the roster, Jets needed somebody to step up as the wide receiver 2 behind Garrett Wilson. Nobody really has. Look at the defensive side of the ball. I mean, I think we talked in the preseason about this. This was supposed to be the dominant unit on the team. And really from week one, where they lost a game they easily could have won, where the offense put up over 30 points, the defense has been torched regularly. You see a lack of fundamentals on that side of the ball. You see guys who had been good in the past kind of regressing. There's no simple answers, but and I think when the team is as bad as the Jets are, there are probably a lot of culprits.
Yeah, I would agree with that sentiment here. And stick on the quarterback theme here with Justin Fields. Obviously, they made the big bet. It didn't work. He's been benched for Tyrod Taylor entering week 12 here. Does not feel like with Tyrod's track record, he's going to last the rest of the year here. Like, the quarterback situation here, like, do you feel like at some point is this going to be okay, like, there's 4 weeks to go, let's just throw Brady Cook in and see if he's anything? Like, do you think Fields gets another shot at this? Like, how do you think they're going to handle the quarterback spot the rest of the way?
I think it depends on how things go with Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor's had a long career. He's very respected across the league, but at this point of his career, I would not expect much, particularly within this offensive infrastructure, which is really just not that good at the skill spots. I think the question is, at what point do you need to make a change? I think if something happens with Tyrod Taylor this week, Justin Fields probably goes back in. I think if you get to like the last week or two of the season, that's the point where maybe you see Brady Cook. But you have to remember a couple of things here. First of all, Brady Cook was a non-drafted rookie free agent signing. Second of all, he was not on the active roster at the beginning of the season. And third of all, he would not even be on this team had Jordan Travis not retired after the draft. So I don't think Brady Cook's really part of the Jets' future here. And yeah, I mean, you may reach a point where you just throw him in there and maybe he surprises you. But I think that's one of the difficult things for this Jets team is that there's nothing really to be gained by the quarterback situation going forward. You look at other teams across the league where they're playing young guys. Even if you're having a bad season, you can rationalize it. Well, at least we're getting our young guys some reps. There really is no young guy on the Jets outside of Brady Cook, and I'm not even convinced Brady Cook's going to be on the team next year.
Yeah, I don't think that's I think their best year over what Brady Cook is sort of, maybe he's a long-term backup, but he's not going to be a starter for them here. And we've learned a lot also about Aaron Glenn as a head coach, and obviously he shows a lot of emotion on the sideline. He tends to fight the media, seems like unnecessarily at points. Like, there have been, like, questions about like some of his choices in terms of waiting too long to bench the quarterback, some of his like game playing tendencies. Like, what have you seen from year one of Aaron Glenn?
It's difficult to judge, and I'll tell you the reason I say that, Mike. year one tends to not be a great predictor of how a coach does over the course of his career. I mean, I talked about this on Locked On Jets a lot. You can look at the list of coaches who made the playoffs in year one. It includes guys like Adam Gase in Miami. It includes Ben McAdoo with the Giants. And then you look at the list of guys who had terrible first seasons. You know, it includes, I don't like using this example because I think it's overdone, but Dan Campbell, who Aaron Glenn coached under Detroit. It includes Kyle Shanahan. If you want a more realistic coach to aim for, maybe a Zach Taylor from Cincinnati, who may not be the greatest coach in the league, but was the coach of a team that went to the Super Bowl a couple of years later. So it's been bad. I don't want to sugarcoat it. I think Glenn is going to have to change some of the things he does this offseason. I think he's going to have to take a look at the job his coordinators are doing and figure out how to improve that, whether that's the coordinator themselves getting better and providing guidance to make that happen, or whether that's making a change. I think that there are other aspects of what we've seen from the Jets, a lack of discipline at a lot of points. It's difficult to say exactly how much of that's on the coaching staff, but on some level, I think it does have to be on the coaching staff. But I think the bigger question is, how do you fight through adversity? Because, those coaches I mentioned who made the playoffs in year one, whether you're talking Gase or McAdoo, and you could go down the list. Eric Mangini did. You got to go all the way back to the 90s. Rich Kotite made the playoffs his first year as Eagles head coach, and Jets fans certainly remember how Rich Kotite's career ended. It's very easy to enter a head coaching job with a plan, because if you're an assistant coach in the NFL, you're probably thinking from the day your career starts how you would run a team. So most of these guys get to a team and they have a pretty good plan. The question is, how do you respond when things don't work? And for some guys like Aaron Glenn, their plan doesn't work at the start. Can you fight out of that? Can you figure out a way to adjust? To me, that's like the more relevant question with Aaron Glenn. We knew that year one was probably not going to be great. I think we were hoping for better, but I think the story with Aaron Glenn is unwritten right now. I don't love using Dan Campbell because everybody uses it because that's where Aaron Glenn came from, but people forget Dan Campbell's year one not only did not go well, the offense looked lost, and Dan Campbell had to make a coordinator change. His original offensive coordinator was Anthony Lynn, the former head coach of the Chargers. And after that first year, he said, you know what, I have to make a change. And he fired Anthony Lynn and he promoted Ben Johnson, and the rest is history. So I look at this from a more long-term point of view. And the question for me with Aaron Glenn that's relevant is not so much, how did the first year go? The question is, how are we going to improve the things that need to be improved?
Yeah, I think my thing with Glenn more is sort of like when you come in here preaching accountability, going, okay, we're not going to make these mistakes anymore. We're going to be more disciplined. And it looks like you're starting out great when you cut the kick returner week one, who Xavier Newman, after he fumbles the kickoff, that costs you the game. But then they're continually running Michael Clemens out despite him continually making mistakes, penalties, and big spots. They cut the guy who fumbled the punt in week 4 in Miami, and he's still back on the team. To me, it's a point of it's hard to sell that and then just let God and be selective when you choose to promote accountability.
Yeah, I think I'd even take it a step further, is that Glenn did a lot of talking about how good this coaching staff was this offseason. I remember in particular Will McDonald. They were talking about how in practice Will McDonald playing the run so much better. They said that's all coaching. Well, Will McDonald played the run horribly this year, and I know he had that 4-sack game against Cleveland, but he has, despite what the stats say, he has not had a great season. So I think that's true in a lot of cases. I think you hit the nail on the head that there are lots of cases where Glenn was talking a big game in the preseason, and when you don't deliver after talking a big game, you've opened yourself up to criticism.
Yes, I think that's my big issue with is that. Plus, I mean, the fact that in terms of the I'm also I feel like Glenn and all Jets coaches that were in this, I don't think anybody ever wants to hear about how they had a great week of practice again, because whenever they have a great week of practice, I always think they play terribly.
Mike, I actually really should research this, because I want to know if this is something that coaches across the NFL say, or if this is just a Jets thing. Because you go back to Rex Ryan. Every single Jets coach has talked about the great week of practice the week before they get blown out. I would be really interested to find out if the other 31 teams coaches talk about having a great week of practice, because every single Jets coach does it.
Yeah, I don't know if it's something in the water over there, but a couple more things here with the Jets here. Obviously, we'll talk about the deadline moves here. One guy did not get moved and wanted out for the most part. It seems like Breece Hall, and it seems like they're going to try and focus in on him sort of being the key of the offense going forward here. They have a ton of cap space. He's going to be free at the end of the year. Do you think they keep Breece Hall? Or do you think they're ready to move on? Because they had a high price on at the deadline. Nobody met it.
I do think they'll keep him for the reason you say. If he wasn't coming back, I don't know why you would not have just traded him for whatever you could get at the deadline, because the only way the Jets could get compensation if Breece Hall leaves are if, first of all, if they do a tag and trade with the franchise tag, which is always easier said than done. I mean, people always talk about the team's going to tag and trade a guy. It very rarely happens. Or if they get a compensatory pick. But the thing with the compensatory pick system is that you have to lose more players than you gain in free agency. And for this Jets team with so many needs across the board and so much cap space this offseason, I mean, I would find it very unlikely that they'd be able to get a compensatory pick. So what that tells me is that Breece Hall is probably likely to come back. And I understand why, because they made the trades at the deadline with Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams, and I think that that's a clear sign that they're trying to reallocate where the resources are. They had a lot of their premium resources dedicated to the defense. Well, they get all these draft picks now, and I think you and I both know that they're probably going to draft a quarterback either in 2026 or 2027. That allows you to, these extra picks allow you to put a lot of pieces around that quarterback on the offensive side of the ball. But you'd also want to keep Breece Hall around. And, one thing that was notable, there was a report that came out as the Jets traded Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams at the deadline. Teams checked in on Garrett Wilson, which is a logical move. It seemed like the Jets were having a fire sale. And those teams reportedly were told Garrett Wilson is untouchable. And what that tells me is that the Jets are really focused on building a core around whatever quarterback they draft, which will be a welcome change of pace because the Jets usually throw young quarterbacks into an impossible situation. And I think Breece Hall would be a logical guy to want a young quarterback to be around. He's a big play guy on offense. He's a good target on a check down. He can he can turn a check down into a 20-yard gain. So it makes sense to keep him around. And the Jets are going to have plenty of cap space. And I think, in that context, even if you have to overpay to keep Breece Hall, it makes sense because he'll be really valuable for whatever quarterback you draft.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of those deadline moves here, obviously they took the NFL by storm with the trades to send out Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams here. Logically, I understand what they did. They had a high price. Somebody met it. They were losing with these guys. It's easy to lose without them and get picks to help you get better, potentially quicker here. Like, what was your reaction when you first saw these moves and realized what the direction was going to be here?
I was shocked. The Jets never ceased to make me look bad. I did Locked On Jets that day of the deadline, and I said that there was absolutely no way they were trading Sauce Gardner, and I said it was unlikely they'd trade Quinnen Williams. I think I had mixed feelings on it. I think that you could have justified going in either direction. I think these are two high-end players, two guys who are legitimate stars. I think in the NFL, you try and build around stars. That said, if the Jets are moving in the direction of drafting a quarterback in 2026 or 2027, this is a logical thing to do because you can, again, reallocate all the resources that are in defense and put them into an offense that can build around a young quarterback. I think they got fair value for both players. Like, I don't think either deal was a terrible deal value-wise, but the question comes down to now what you do with the picks. I said this at the time the deal was made, that this is not the type of deal that can be graded immediately. I know we love to grade every single deal, as it happens, but this will come down to whether the Jets hit on all the picks that they got. Jimmy Johnson was the coach of the Cowboys when they made that famous trade in 1989 involving Herschel Walker, got a bunch of picks from Minnesota, drafted players that helped them build the dynasty of the 90s. And Jimmy Johnson said that the most important part of that trade was drafting the right players with the picks we got. We've seen these deals where teams get a lot of picks for a player or two players, or sometimes they trade down in the draft, and sometimes they don't make the right choices. I mean, you go back to 1999, that famous deal between Washington and New Orleans, where the Saints sent Washington their entire draft class for Ricky Williams. Washington did not hit on enough picks. You could talk Washington, St. Louis in 2012, the RG3 trade. St. Louis did not hit on enough of the picks. I think these deals are the embodiment of the term high risk, high reward, because the Jets potentially set themselves up to turbocharge this rebuild if they hit on the picks. If they don't, well, they just gave away one of the top three corners in the league who is entering his prime, and they gave away a guy who's probably a top 5 defensive tackle. They gave away 2 star players. So These picks did not fall out of the sky. They had to give up really important pieces to get them. The question is now, what will they hit with those picks? Because if they do, these deals will be remembered fondly. If they do not, these deals will be remembered as all-time disasters, no matter what people are saying now.
Yeah, I think that's fair here. A couple of other things before we wrap up here. I think one of the positives for the Jets here is the rookie class as a whole has been pretty good. Obviously, the highlights Armand Membu and Mason Taylor, but I feel like they're getting contributions from guys in the later rounds. It doesn't happen much of late. So, what do you about the Jet rookies?
Yeah, I'd say that there's encouraging things from Malachi Moore, who was the 4th-round pick as well. He stepped into the starting lineup a little while back. This is a Jets team that is undergoing a huge youth movement right now. The Jets on any given Sunday are usually giving between 9 and 11 first or second year players significant snaps. And if you're rebuilding and if you are pretty much starting from scratch, that's how you do it. You just put young guys out there, you get them reps in games, and you hope that the game reps help them to develop. It's not a new approach. The Jets did that in Robert Saleh's first year. So, there's no guarantee it's going to work. Some of the guys they have out there are not going to develop. But I think if you're going to lose anyway, you're best served giving these young guys playing time. And, as you mentioned, Armand Membu looks like a legitimate starting right tackle. I am close, and we're over halfway through his rookie season. I don't like to make proclamations like this, but I'm about as close as I can to, at this point of a rookie year, to saying I'm really confident Armand Membu is going to be an 8 to 10 year starter for this team if nothing unexpected happens. So, for the Jets, I think it's frustrating for fans to hear because we hear this over and over and over. We just have to be patient. Well, we're now entering year 15 with no playoffs, but the future could be bright for the New York Jets if things go right with the young players and with the picks. And there are things to like about the young players on the team.
Yeah, for sure here. So assuming that's probably our big thing you're watching for down the stretch here. They still as of recording time, they still have 7 games to go. They are they're all likely not being Baltimore on Sunday. They still they just win a couple here, impact their draft pick here. But what are you watching for? I think besides the rookies, I'm also curious to see if some of these flyer receivers they picked up, whether it's A.D. Mitchell or John Mechie, if one of these guys can stick and be a functional receiver 3 for this team. It's something you could make one less hole you need to fill in the offseason.
I think that's exactly it. I think the Jets are still going to need a wide receiver this offseason, no matter what happens with Mitchell and Mechie. I think they're going to need a number 2 receiver, no matter what happens with Mitchell and Mechie. The question is whether these guys can maybe fill a spot lower on the depth chart, like the number 3 receiver. In terms of the rest of the way, it's not all about wins and losses. It's definitely about player development. But speaking of the coaching staff, you want to see some of the things that have been happening this season that are negative go away. You want to see less busted coverages in the secondary. You want to see the Jets, not commit penalties. I think the big thing is, and this is tough when you have a young team, because people complain about, people say they want young players on the field, and then they put young players on the field. Well, young players can be kind of undisciplined, but you just want to see more cohesiveness. You want to see the Jets not give games away. I mentioned this on a recent episode of Locked On Jets that in many ways the Jets are both playing their opponents and themselves this year, where they're not good enough to make the mistakes that they're making, where they're essentially giving free gifts to the other team. So on most weeks, the Jets are going to be less talented than their opponent. They're going to lose games, but you want to make it as hard on your opponent as possible, even when you lose. You don't want to just hand them games the way the Jets have been doing through the early part of the season.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the last question here, obviously, Jet fans, everybody be frustrated about the never-ending rebuild cycle. I think I said at the top of the pod, it feels like the 4th different iteration of rebuild they've gone through since they last made the playoffs here. They are armed with more picks, it feels like. The potential of over $200 million in cap space entering 2027 is nice. So what do you think is the realistic timeline here for this organization to build that roster that can finally snap the playoff drought? For me, I feel like the answer to this is almost can we get the quarterback right first?
Absolutely. I think that's accurate. These things turn around quicker than you think in the NFL. Look, if the Jets have a good offseason next year, it's not that hard to be the 7th best team in the 16-team conference. you get a few breaks along the way, you get good injury luck, you get a good schedule, you could turn this around pretty quickly. I'm not saying the Jets are going to be in the Super Bowl next year, but to have a winning record, it's not as hard as you think in the NFL. I mean, the difference between a team that goes 6-11 and 11-6 are a few bounces of the ball along the way. So I think that it can turn around quicker. And I think one of the problems is that when you have a 15-year stretch where you miss the playoffs, and when you're going on now, I think it's going to be 10 straight years with a losing record, it gives you the perception that it takes forever to turn it around. When in reality, if you have the right people in place and you have the right moves, as long as you have like a decent amount of resources, which the Jets have, it can turn around really, really fast. So, I mean, if they do this offseason right, they could have a winning season next year, and they'll still have all those picks. I mean, they'll have 3 first-round picks in 2027. This could become very quickly one of the most desirable situations in the league. But that's if they get everything right. And of course, unfortunately, the Jets are bearing the burden of their past. And, it's not Aaron Glenn's fault. Aaron Glenn wasn't here for the failures of the last 15 years. I think he was here as a low-level scout. That's how he started his career, his post-playing career. But, it's not Aaron Glenn's fault that they've missed on everything. It's not Darren Muji's fault. But I think the fan base is understandably skeptical because we've been sold this before. You've heard this over and over that we have the resources. We're going to turn it around, and it hasn't happened yet. This time, can it be different? Absolutely. Just because you failed in the past does not necessarily mean you're doomed to that same failure going forward. That's the great thing about the NFL is you can mess up 4 times on a rebuild. You still have a chance to get it right the 5th time.
Yeah, you certainly can. And obviously the big thing here is obviously the quarterback situation, what happens with that, because it's unclear if they want to go this year or next year. But, we've seen that, just because you get the quarterback doesn't mean you fix everything. We saw the Jets a couple of times now, 2 starters in the league, including, a potential down-ballot MVP candidate in Seattle, are Jet picks who were not developed here. So you want to watch this year to see, do they have the right infrastructure to help whichever quarterback they get?
I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think that more than anything was the mindset behind those trades that they made, because with, 2 first-round picks this year and 2 second-round picks, and then 3 first-round picks next year and a second-round pick, you have enough resources to really build a quality offense around whatever quarterback you draft. And you'll still have Garrett Wilson, and if you re-sign Breece Hall, you'll have him. So, and you have on the offensive line, you have Armand Dembou, who looks like a starting right tackle, and Olu Fashanu, who has been more up and down than Dembou, but he's showing some positive signs of late. So, if you've got those pieces, if you got all these draft picks where you can supplement the quarterback with young talent, and you got Garrett Wilson, and let's say you keep Breece Hall, and let's say Fashanu works out, suddenly, you have a lot of the infrastructure that you need. You have a lot of the infrastructure the other quarterbacks didn't have.
Yeah. We'll see how this plays out, John. Thanks for all the time. I really appreciate it. People want to follow your podcast, keep up with some of your content, social media. How can they do that?
So you can follow my writing on gangreennation.com, and then Locked On Jets is available on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts.
All right, John. Thanks for all the time. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure, Mike. Always great to chat.